And welcome to this week's Work It Wednesday through Dressage Addicts Rider to Rider Support Scheme. This week we have a very special guest of Alice Walker. She is the physio for both me and my horses and is specialised in rider biomechanics. So she looks at both me and the horses and then puts us together as a partnership. So we work out whose problems are affecting who. And this week she is going to talk specifically about our horses and how we can help them.
Hi, my name's Alice. I'm an equine and human physiotherapist. I'm the founder and lead physio for Award Equine Physio, which was established 10 years ago. I've been asked to do a contribution to this Workout Wednesday series for Amelia. So I hope that the following will highlight some of the areas that you've requested that I speak about, and also give you some insight into the importance of physio and how it can help you and your horse.
Physiotherapist should be treated as important as your farrier. You should have regular checks on your horse. If the physio picks up on certain aspects of issues, you might need to have frequent checks. Prevention is always better than cure. Just make sure that your physio is fully registered, ideally with RAMP, the Register of Animal Musculoskeletal Practitioners. That's a very holistic register. But also ideally a chartered physiotherapist, which means they're also qualified to treat humans, because then they can look at you as well. Their understanding tends to be a little deeper than sports massage therapists and other therapy professions out there. One thing to bear in mind is that the title physiotherapist with equine in front of it, i.e. a horse physio, is not what we call a protected title. So that means that anybody can call themselves a horse physio, whereas if you're a human physio, you have to be qualified. Otherwise, it's an offence to call yourself a human physio. That's just a side note to bear in mind. Equine posture is really complex, and their posture has a direct influence on how they move. Horses are not designed to actually be ridden, and we sit on their weakest part of their backs. Therefore, we need to make sure they have the best posture possible in order for them to support our weight as a rider, and also to allow them to do the functional movements such as dressage, jumping, even hacking, without causing undue strain on other joints. By best posture, as you can see from the pictures of Jazz before and after, we are looking for their backs to be lifted by the abdominal sling and their positioning of their pelvis to be in neutral. We'll go through that a little bit later as well. The neutral pelvis is really important, as it allows for them to change their rhythm within their push within the gait. So that's medium trot, that's collected trot. But if your horse has got a pelvis that won't sit in neutral, because often they sit back in posterior tilt due to stiffness and weakness, they tend to not like to move forwards, lift across the back, and allow them to carry you as well. So here I'm looking at little Freddie's back. I'm checking all down the spine, at the muscles either side of the spine. There's a few muscles that run down either side of the back. We're looking for it to be tight, or have a little bit of spasm where it kind of jiggers around, or for him to show a pain reaction. So it is important to kind of watch your horse while you're doing this. You can do this, just be gentle, do a smooth kind of forceful movement along their backs. You'll get to know what's normal for them. So if you do often do this, you'll then learn what's normal for them. So then you can apply you can check whether there's any changes. We also need to compare left to right when checking their backs. So make sure that you check both sides when you're running your hand down their backs. Before treating a horse, I look at them standing still. So I look at their posture, their demeanour, how they're lifting their abdominals, what do their facial expressions tell me. A horse in pain is quite easy to pick up through their facial expressions with experience. I'll then look at them moving. We look at them walking away, walking in front of me and walking back to me. And then also in the trot. This is really important. So I've got a baseline to know what we're dealing with. I look for the pelvis to swing both ways equally. I look for the pelvis to move forwards and backwards when they're doing the transitions up and down. And I also look for the hind limbs to fall in the space of the forelimbs and the forelimbs to move nice and free. Also look for their facial expressions, for any pain signs, and for their head and neck can tell you quite a lot. You know, are they relaxed and low, or are they tense and stiff through their neck, which is causing them to tense through their backs. Here you can see me midway through a treatment for Fred. I use a lot of different techniques, including mobilising the spinal column and mobilising the pelvis. Depending on what I find on the day, I'll tailor this to whatever the horse needs that day. But I kind of do a top to toe check to make sure all the vertebrae are moving as well as they can, both left to right as well as the pelvis. Here I'm mobilising the back and the pelvis. After treatment here, you can see the pelvic swing is really nice. He's got increased stride length. He's really happy through his body. And that's exactly what I look for after treatment. Sometimes it's not quite as successful, but then kind of rethink your approach and also prescribe some specific exercises from whatever you find on the post-treatment trot up. Ways to check that your horse needs physio. So it's really good to learn what your horse's normal back feels like and what their normal pelvic movement feels like and what their normal circles look like. So this is something that you can practice every day. In fact, I would advise you to do it every day in an ideal world. So just simply by running your hands down their back can tell you a lot about how they're feeling. It might not be they need treatment at that point, but that might be how they're feeling that day. You might think, oh, they're actually feeling really tense today, so I'm going to change my work plan up. But if you see a recurrent pattern of one-sided tightness, both sides are tight, they're sore through their back while you're running your hands down, then that is a real clear indication that you need to get your physio to check your horse. Making sure their pelvis moves in both directions and also flat and up, and it goes back to the position it's meant to be in. If it can't do any of these moves again, that's a really clear indication that your horse will need physio. As we said earlier, the pelvis is a really important part of the horse. Here you can see me identify the angle of the pelvis with my fingers. I then create a little bit of a reflex for Fred to flatten his pelvis, and then he softens it back up. This is really important part of your horse to check. A physio should be checking this when they visit, but make sure that if you want to try this, that you do stay out of hind leg ways if your horse isn't used to this move. And the other really, really good method is circling them in really tight circles. You can see here that I'm doing it with Fred. Really small circles. The important thing here is to keep them walking forwards. You're looking for that hind leg to step across, but then you need to gaze your eyes up to their back while you're doing it and see, are they flexing through their whole spine? Or are they hitching their hips up and kind of making that step under happen, but by compensating elsewhere on their bodies? So by doing this both ways, you'll learn the normal for your horse. If it's different left to right, get your physio to have a look and review. Carrot or baited stretches are also a good way to spot if your horse isn't very happy through its body, as well as maintaining muscle length and range of movement both through the spine and through the pelvis. Here you can see me doing it on Fred. I divide mine up into 3. So I do high up to the pelvis, and then around to the side, and then round to the side and down to the floor. So that's a lower one. So the high up to the pelvis one deals with the thoracic spine, which is underneath the saddle. The low to the floor one deals with more of the lumbar spine, which is behind the saddle area. And then I do one between the legs, and that helps stretch the whole back out as well as engaging that abdominal sling. And that's a really good one to just get them engaging, lifting, and giving them an overall stretch. You're best to do this very slowly, no snatching. You want them to bring their heads round really slowly to the side, stand nice and square. Ideally not move their legs, but you need to build up to that. And ideally in three of each on each side, but you want to hold it for as long as they'll stay there. So if you can get them there for 10, 15, 20 seconds, that is fantastic. You might find they would struggle more when their bodies are cold and they haven't been worked, but you can still stretch them. If it's a day off, still stretch them out, but maybe after they've been out if you've got an option of either or. But it is okay to stretch a colder horse. Just look at their bodies. If they can't go quite as far, don't push them.
Ideally, your horse needs to have its back checked every 6 to 12 weeks. This is very dependent on your horse's history, what you do with your horse, and obviously your wallet. So it does also depend on your management techniques. Your physio should give you lots of exercises to do in between sessions. If you do these religiously, as well as incorporating 1 or 2 groundwork sessions a week, then you may be able to extend between the sessions. This is very dependent on the horse and rider, so please discuss it with your physio. To help improve your horse's suppleness and strength across their backs, I would do the baited carrot stretches like I showed you earlier, twice a day ideally, especially if you have an issue. You can also do very simple pole exercises in hand. One really nice pole exercise that I like to prescribe to a lot of my clients is raised walk poles. You don't need to worry about pacing them out because they are walk poles. You can raise them up so your horse has to work really hard, and then you can progress this once they've mastered that to also halting and walking on in the middle of the poles. If your horse is assessed by a physio, you'll be able to get a bespoke package of exercises that's designed specifically for your horse and its weaknesses. Saddle pads. Interesting question. There is quite a lot of research being done at the moment regarding saddle pads. I know it's a real trend to have a lovely fluffy sheepskin pad under your saddle, and it does look rather nice. However, it does not replace a well-fitted saddle. You need to make sure that if you want a sheepskin underneath, you talk to your saddler at time of fitting and make sure they adjust the saddle to accommodate for the increased width that the saddle pad will offer. If you're worried about the fit of your saddle, get a fitter out. I do also really like the VIP pads. They have been through a lot of tests to show that they have a lot of shock absorption, and they are good, but again, they do not replace good fitted saddles. So that would be my one bit of advice, is that sheepskin saddle pads do not have impact protection. They do look rather nice, and if you do want to have one under your saddle, get it fitted to your saddle at time of fitting. We're actually going to do another session specifically about riders. It's a huge subject area. I'm very passionate about rider musculoskeletal health, so core stability is very complex in riders because it isn't just about a strong six-pack. My one bit of advice in the meantime though would be try lots of different exercises. Make sure you're doing at least 2 other sporting exercises other than riding, and that does not include mucking out. So that might be yoga, that might be running, that might be at home Zumba or HIIT, and it can be as simple as walking, but really purposeful walking. So I would do a variety of exercises would be my best advice for core stability, but we will go into that more detail next time. Tight hips are a huge common problem within horse riders. I think every rider that I see has tight hips, one or other or both. So there are some good exercises for opening up your hips, but I will go through those in detail on our next session that I do with Amelia, where we're going to look specifically at riders. Franklin balls can be magic. They are used, or they should be used, by trained professionals. They help with biomechanics and they help with proprioceptive feedback, which is the awareness of your limbs in space. So that also includes your pelvic position. I use the big peanut ball often on riders to help awareness of where their pelvis is. But it isn't a tool to solving your problems, but it is a tool for helping you build body awareness. Relaxing in the saddle. Okay, so breathing. Breathing's pretty important to us as humans and horses, but it's something that's really overlooked. If we don't breathe properly in the saddle, we become extremely tight in our bodies, especially in our hips and our seat and our lower legs. So to help us relax in the saddle, my one bit of advice would be to work on your breathing. So these are simple belly breaths that if you do yoga, it's kind of your yoga breathing. So breathing in through your nose for a count of 4, holding for 4, and breathing out for 4. And create that cycle in your head while you're riding, and that should help you relax in the saddle.
So I just want to say the biggest of thank yous to Alice for giving us all that information. My head feels like it's going to explode. I cannot wait for part 2, which is going to be all about the rider and how we can be stronger, straighter and better in the saddle. I'm not looking forward to demonstrating the exercises though, but hey ho. So yes, join us for that in a few weeks' time when Alice comes back to treat me. Again, thank you very much to Alice, and thank you to all of you for engaging and watching. This has been a Dressage Addict Rider to Rider support video.